Welcome to the Blue Family News, very first Q&A session, sponsored obviously by the Police Federal Credit Union of Omaha. I'm Ken Bader. I'm the CEO of the Police Officers Credit Union Association, and privileged to facilitate this very first session, whether you're joining us live or joining us on the recording. We definitely highly appreciate that you're here. And for the first Q&A session, we have a wonderful guest, somebody that I've known for a while. Her name is Vicki Newman. She's an author. She's a founder of How to Love Our Cops, which is plural. I know it used to be, I think it was How to Love My Cop, and then it became How to Love Our Cops. So it's grown, which is awesome. And she's doing some great work with police officers' families throughout the country. Most importantly, she is a law enforcement spouse. She was married to a California highway patrolman who just retired just a few months ago. First of all, tell us about How to Love Our Cops and what your organization is doing for law enforcement families.
So How to Love Our Cops is a nonprofit. We've been around for about 3 years, and we educate and encourage and equip not just spouses, families of law enforcement to thrive relationally and emotionally and spiritually. That's our mission statement. What does that look like? Well, we were up until last year very event centric. We do have in hand resources like some books and some other things on our website. But we were doing a lot of events, and of course, 2020 was not kind to us, and so we have rethought everything, and now we're doing events online. We did some Zoom calls for a while until we got hacked by police haters, and so we've rethought that. We're going to more of a podcast here, probably March or April. We're also doing a national book club, kind of an online type of Zoom thing with spouses all over the country, going through A Chip on My Shoulder, which is my original book, but it's very foundational to law enforcement marriage from the spouse side. And so we're doing that. We're just doing a bunch of different things, starting chapters in other states. So right now we have 5 other states beside California, which is where I'm from. And, excited about that because really we want more than just our outlook. Right. Things are different from California as they are in Iowa or Kansas or South Dakota, very different South Dakota. And so we really want to hear what are some of the challenges, what are some of the things that you're going through, probably similar to people in California or Florida or Maine, but we want to hear and we want to be in touch with spouses all over. So that's a little bit of what we're doing. There's more, but I won't take the time right now.
Yeah, having lived personally in 3 different states, growing up in Illinois and now living in California, I can honestly say, especially for this specific audience in Nebraska, Iowa, and South Dakota, that there is nothing like California. So we, good, bad, or indifferent.
Thank God that we're the only ones like us.
It is
not real happy with us, but there it is.
Let's just say it's a different animal, and I, for one, truly appreciate that you realize that, and that cultures are a little bit different in many other states. But I also want to ask too, before we get into a little bit, a few deeper questions, if you will. What was the impetus of not only How to Love Our Cops, but if I remember it correctly, A Chip on My Shoulder was your first book.
Yeah.
Uh, what did you get hit with a lightning bolt? Did somebody say, "Hey, you have a lot of insight, Vicky. You really need to write this book for law enforcement spouses"? What was the impetus to kind of begin all of these great things that you're doing for law enforcement families?
From the very beginning, and I do have some of those stories in a chip on my shoulder, but so I won't tell them right now. But from the very beginning, I knew that there was something different about being married to a police officer. And we were in Los Angeles. My husband was a new officer, and something he started to change, and I was like, wait a minute, this isn't exactly who I married. What is this stuff? And tried to talk to other spouses, and they just were not having it. They didn't want to talk about it. And then all of a sudden we're seeing divorces, and so I knew something was very different from the beginning. And then as a writer, I was helping a lot of people write books at that time.
Hmm.
So later on, we'd been married approximately 20 years, and we had several suicides in the California Highway Patrol, which is who my husband was serving with. And it was the end of 2005, beginning of 2006, and we had lost 6 officers in the line of duty. But at the same time, we were having more and more frequent suicides. And it was the 15th in 4 years, but again, they were closer and closer together. And everybody, the department, everybody, including me, said, "What are we going to do about this? There's something obviously wrong here, and what can we do?" And I thought, maybe if I just shared my story, and some of the stories of other people that I knew, maybe that would help the marriages. Because I knew that in my research that a lot of suicides, the last straw is the end of a significant relationship,
Mm.
and a lot of times it's a divorce,
Sure.
or a leaving. If usually something is spiraling, people are jumping ship, and then they pull the trigger or do whatever they do to kill themselves. And so I wrote the book. Took me a while to actually get to the point of where I actually wrote it. And once it went out and was published and was out there, I started getting letters from all over the United States just saying, "You've written my story. This is
Hmm.
the first time I thought I was all alone." And then I started hearing more and more serious things that weren't true in my marriage, but I started seeing more and more of some of these really dark things that were going on with PTSD and just different things in other marriages. And so I started and learning more and more and more. And it got to be too much for me all alone, because I started thinking of things. Oh, we could do this and we could do that, and we could, let's do something, and let's be in community with other law enforcement spouses. And
Right.
this was years ago, and now we're doing that, which is great. But at the time, there was virtually nothing. And so, How to Love Our Cops, it was How to Love Your Cop. Now it's How to Love Our Cops, because we're more than just spouses.
Yeah.
There's therapists that are with us. There's all these different people who want to love cops, and we're even just starting to see like some advocacy and racial reconciliation roles that some of us are playing in our organization. And so um, it's become more than just a spouse thing. It's something, and we've got things for officers as well, and in partnerships. And so that's I think that answers your question.
Oh, very much so. Yeah, I'm glad, given what we dealt with and continue to deal with in 2020 and going forward. If we didn't have your organization, that would be a very bad thing, to say it in a very sophomoric way. I'm glad that it's here during this difficult time. As you know, much better than I would know, there are a lot of spouses that are on different points of their journey. You have some folks, spouses that, of police officers that just got on the job in 2020 or are just going out, on the street, and aren't necessarily aware of some of the things that they're going to have to deal with. And then you have others like yourself that, may have been married to a police officer 10, 15, 20, even 25 years. So is there one thing or a couple of things that law enforcement spouses at any point in their journey really need to understand about their law enforcement partner, if you will?
Oh, um, there's several different kinds of spouses, and there's actually what we speak to out of How to Love Our Cops. There's what we call the 4 R's, which are the span of a career, if you will. There's readiness, which is right at the beginning. You're just getting into this and kind of learning, okay, what does this entail? Some people are shocked, some people are prepared. It just, runs the gamut. Then there's resiliency of just learning how to do life with the shift work and with the different, nowadays it's with the hatred and with the opinions that people that you love have about law enforcement, and just dealing with what's normal, what's not. I saw my officer change early on. What is that about? And is that going to continue? Then there's recovery and restoration, which could be anything from if you have an officer who's had a critical incident, or cumulative stress, which is lots of little incidents that just kind of build up over time.
Right.
Or if you have a breakdown in communication and there's an affair, or there's something big, or even life issues that don't even have anything to do with law enforcement, and the marriage is broken down, or the communication is broken down. We look at what are some ways to help with that, and in a reactive type of thing, but then in the resiliency and in the readiness, we also talk about proactive things, education and learning to communicate and learning what are our realistic expectations. And then in the last one, which we haven't done a whole lot with because we're, most of us are not retired. My husband is, but retirement as the last one. And we're realizing that there are many people who are taking early retirement right now. And they're wanting to get out of law enforcement. Who can blame them? And their early retirement, or or they go the full 25 30 years, and they're not prepared. They're just sick of it, and they just want to stop and get out, and there's no plan. And then what do you do when you have a lifetime, many years of difficulty, or just stacked up stuff, dirty closets, basically, shoved things in rooms that you just don't open the door anymore. And then all of a sudden there's no distraction. And then, we see this a lot with retired spouses coming forth and going, what the heck? I want him to go back to work. I don't want him around anymore. Those kinds of things. So.
Leave the house. Could you please get in a car again, or back on a bike or something? Are there any questions from anybody with us live? Either anybody on the phone or anybody on a laptop?
Well, I was going to comment. It's not maybe a question, but speaking to the retirement part, I remember my dad, when he retired, he sat home for a year. He had all these plans. He was going to play golf. He was going to do this. He was going to do that. And it didn't come to fruition.
Mhm.
And after a year, at least he was smart enough to realize that he needed to do something. He was still a young man, mid 50s when he retired, 53, maybe 54. And so he needed to find something else to do, and he did that. And I saw the difference in him, working in a non-law enforcement role, and it was good for him.
Mhm.
The other thing I was going to say is, officers tend to, obviously they're usually strong personalities because they have to be in their career, and they're fixers. And so as a family member, if you're that personality too, it makes it difficult because sometimes all they need to do is for you to listen.
Yeah.
And you can't fix things for them. And the family member also needs to understand that that the officer can't tell them everything because there's just certain things on the job that they can't, or it's too painful to talk about. And so I think that having groups now like this is wonderful so that we can talk about these things, because we didn't have this, when my dad was on the job. And, that was a very, very long time ago. So you had a lot of stay-at-home moms that were dealing with kids, and they didn't get out of the house. Maybe they were a one-car family. So, the officer took the car to work, and the other spouse is home with the kids, and can't get out, and can't reach out and have those groups like it can have now. And I think that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh gosh, so many memories as you're talking. And I was at home for most of the time because we were able to. We made a few sacrifices for that. Um, and then toward the end, I started doing this and started traveling. And now he and I both traveled together more often than not because he did have an exit plan. So he's doing what I do only for officers. Do a lot of work together now, but he's still retired, right? So I am doing more than he is, and our roles have reversed. And it's been amazing to get that perspective.
Is there maybe a number one thing, especially for any spouses that, um, for lack of a better way of putting it, may be new to the program? Maybe their spouse is in 6 months or a year or something. Is there like one thing that, okay, as a police officer spouse, you better damn well understand this sooner rather than later?
Oh, that's hard to knock it down to one thing, but I would say the number one thing is find your voice and use it wisely. And what I mean by that is our officers, more than ever right now, need us. I believe that the families of law enforcement is the dark horse, if you will, of officer wellness. Um, and the suicide issues that we're having, that's one of the big topics in the law enforcement community, is talking about suicide. And they're giving lots of training to officers, which they need to. But I submit to you that if you have an officer who is exhibiting suicidal tendencies at work, you may be too late. We at home are the early warning system. And the problem is that you have um, that breakdown in communication, like you were saying, Mary, about they can't tell us everything, and so they don't say anything, but they need to say something, right? I don't want to hear about the gore. I don't want to hear about the bloody stuff, right? But I want to know if you saw a little girl die today that looks like my little blonde headed sweetheart at home. I need to know that, because if you can't tell me something, then my mind goes crazy and I think it's me. I
Mm.
think you're unhappy. I think that I've done something wrong.
Mhm.
Because, as much as our officers love to say, well, I don't want to bring it home, the moment you walk into the house, you brought it home. Because this stuff is, I mean, our officers are human beings, and I think we've forgotten that in our society. We forget that, when you have something like George Floyd, they don't just go skipping home or skipping to the next call.
Right.
That imprints itself, the things that they see and hear and smell and touch imprint itself on their souls. And when they come home, they can do their best not to say a thing or try to leave it at work. But really, that's not reality. And so I believe, and I'm kind of on my soapbox here, so I apologize, but
That's okay. We gave you a soapbox. Go for it.
reach. um, we okay. Quick story. Um, California Highway Patrol. We lost a spouse in October 2018. Or not a spouse. We lost an officer on duty suicide. He was a friend of ours, and I know and love his spouse. And she and I were having a conversation, and she says to me, if I would have checked my texts 20 minutes earlier, perhaps we could have saved him. And and she was weeping, and I'm like, sweetheart, it wasn't about those 20 minutes. It was there had to be something that you saw before. And she goes, I did see it, but I didn't know what it was. And even if I knew what it was, I wouldn't know who to call. I,
Mhm.
I don't know. I don't know what I'm seeing. I don't know if it's normal. I don't know. I just don't know. And if I saw something, who am I going to tell? Because I sure as heck don't want to call up his sergeant,
Mm-hmm.
because then they'll take away his gun, or maybe they'll fire him, and then we're out. I mean, it's just it's it seems like there's no solution. But what the solution, at least what I believe is one of the solutions, is to educate and equip our family members, not just spouses, but moms and brothers and sisters, to really see and to find what, learn what those red flags are, and to understand where they're at. And sometimes it means that they need to just talk to somebody.
Right.
Or maybe it means that they got to go to an intensive, retreat, or a substance abuse, retreat center, something. Because I just really think that we can do this life better as law enforcement families.
Yeah, that's a wonderful answer. It wasn't even soapboxy. Um,
Because I feel very strongly about it. So
I'm sure that there are a lot of marriages out there that aren't dead, but are certainly in some very, very rough waters, especially with everything that's gone on in the last 6 months, 12 months or so. What can you share with spouses that are in that boat trying to repair a relationship where there's still something to repair, but it's a tough road? Do you have a couple of tips or a little bit of advice on that?
I do. I have a little seminar that I do. It's 5 best practices of law enforcement marriage, and one of those is called "Think We, Not Me." And my husband, we almost split. It was just about the time that I was writing "Chip on My Shoulder," and he was in a butt kicker job. He was on call all the time, and it was it was crazy. And he was stressed, and very, very stressed. And normally I was really good at handling the stress. But then I really started getting into this piece of thinking of where, um, like, I'm being a real jerk. I don't need that. And then it started being like, I mean, it was a progressive thinking of where, you know what, I'm sick of this. And you know what, you're not going to treat me like this anymore. And you know what, I'm out. And it was this adversarial attitude of, you've got your thing and I've got mine, and you are treating me horribly. And so I'm gone. And I had an encounter with a sandcastle on a beach one night, and we were in a horrible fight, and I was about ready to leave. And I watched a sandcastle that was gorgeous. I watched the tide roll in and basically wash away this sandcastle. And it became kind of, as I sat there on the beach watching this happen, I started thinking to myself, this is my home. The storms of life that, they keep coming and they're washing away what we have. And then I had a choice to make. Are you going to leave, or are you going to stay and fight? And are you going to think about you or me, or am I going to think about us? And I made a choice that night. And watching the sandcastle disappear was incredibly impactful to my heart. And I said, no, I don't want everything to wash away, because what we have is usually really good. We're just in this really bad season. And so I went back, and the next 3 days were crappy. And then he told me, you know what? I am fighting depression. And it was at that point where he just said those little words where I thought, oh, it's not about me. He needs me. And I love this man, and I don't want to go. I want to be helpful. I want to help him. And what I'm seeing are symptoms of a different problem. It's not us. It's just that we need to do this better. And that was 10 years ago, almost 11 years ago now. And I would have missed so much. We're working together now and seeing some amazing things. We're seeing lives literally change right now. And it's an incredible thing. And we get to work together. And we've had some really good times since then. We've had some crappy times as well. And we've learned and learned and learned some more to work through them. And so I realized that I would have missed a lot, and so would have our kids, and so would have he. And so that would be my number one thing, is when you're going through tough times, think we, not just me.
Other questions that we have from anybody that is here with us live.
Actually, I do have one, and that
Please.
is, when you see a family struggling, like your story that you just told, I see it so many times, and I see the couple working through it, and like you said, you have your good times, and then you still had some bad times, and then they'll have good times again. And the longer the marriage goes on, and the more you have this wave effect, at some point, how do you keep these couples still working together? That some still feel that there's a stigma for outside help, and we have to do away with that stigma, and I don't know quite how to do that.
Yeah, we're working on it every time. The classic way of explaining it basically is like, hey, when you have a plumbing problem, you call a plumber, and when you have an electrical problem, you call an electrician. And I mean, my husband is one of those who really likes to try himself first, right? He wants to watch a YouTube video and then fix it himself.
Mhm.
And
And when the water's coming out of the wall, then it's like, all right, maybe we should call somebody.
we had that just a few months ago. Yes, I kid you not. And so then at that point, things are a little worse. There's more problem than there was. And, really counseling just seems like such a, kumbaya type of, I mean, for those who have not participated in it, it seems like something that's just not going to help. Or, marriage counseling, maybe it's, they're a referee or there's somebody who's going to take a side. And it really, what it is, it's about helping you communicate and find different solutions that maybe you may not think about. And, we have only our experience, but yet sometimes stepping out of what we know and are comfortable with can help big time, because it gets us out of our circular thinking about other ways of communicating or ways of solving some issues. And, so of course I'm preaching to the choir, but we're really working hard to just say, look, let's just try a little something. And so a lot of our events, in fact, most of our events now, we have a therapist. And we always work with culturally competent therapists, somebody who understands cops, understands first responders, really gets it. And it's interesting because we've seen, cops who are like, okay, well, that wasn't so bad. And you get in there a little bit, which is why we've been doing that more and more, of having somebody there who is a therapist. Or actually on our podcast, we'll have several. On our Zoom calls we did too, and that's another way of realizing, this is not holding hands and sitting around in a circle and singing Kumbaya. This is about real problems and real solutions, and actually relief in just getting out a few things. And then there's power therapies like brain spotting and EMDR that can just really help as well and get people sleeping. Our actually spouses as well, but our officers and our spouses who have experienced trauma, some of these power therapies can really, help them get the first night's sleep that they've had in years. Mm. And that speaks volumes. Yeah. And then there's also a plethora of, organizations who can provide this without going through your department. And there's more and more of those all the time. And we do a lot of referrals, with peer support, and then also referrals to people to find someone who they can talk to, whether it be on a Zoom or somebody nearby. And which is another reason why we wanted to do the state liaison, so that we could fish out, those culturally competent therapists that get it, and who are seeing cops and firemen and EMS and military, who can really come alongside and understand, and not sit there and question and then make a judgment. So anyway, that is one of the ways that we do it, is just by exposure, of just bringing out people who get it, and, oh, you're not so scary. And, oh, wow, you said something really amazing that I can maybe take. Well, hey, maybe it wouldn't be so bad to have a conversation. It's kind of like that.
Given the fact that this is sponsored by the Police Federal Credit Union of Omaha, um, do you come across financial problems in marriages that sometimes is one of the real kickers, or might even be the number one issue, and how do you kind of handle that, or do you have any tips or advice as far as that goes?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, a lot of people don't talk about that, because their finances are private and sometimes bring shame with it.
Yeah.
And there's usually a spender and a giver, right? Or a spender and a saver, excuse me,
Right.
a spender and a saver in a marriage. Usually you have one of each. and then that causes that conflict as well. Yes, so that is definitely, and if you have any, a lot of times, I mean, in fact, I would say probably for my husband and I, there's a lot of emotion, especially if the bills are more than what you're bringing in. And of course, we were a one income household. So, and we got paid once a month, right? So toward the end of the month, there was a little bit less money than month
Right.
left. And then that's when, the conflict starts of, why did you buy that? Or why did you put that on the card? And I was like, well, because we don't have any money in the account. And, then that starts to build, right? But then the communication, if there's, the emotions that come with that, then the communication breaks down. And then that can be a real problem. And so, yeah, we see that a lot. Some of the happiest couples that I've ever met have actually gone through the Dave Ramsey program.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're like newlyweds. I mean, it's crazy after they've gone through, because that is, when you've got debt, or it's a backpack on your back, especially I would say on the one who is bringing in the more of the money, especially if there's an at-home spouse. And there's kids, and there's all kinds of financial pressures. The Dave Ramsey program has been life-changing for officers and their spouses, that we've seen. I mean, and seriously, it's like they're newlyweds again, because they don't have that pressure on them, and it seems like they're much happier. So yeah. Does that answer your question?
Very much so. And for those that don't want to do Dave Ramsey, I hear Police Federal Credit Union of Omaha has something called the Blue Review, which is also something that any law enforcement families in Nebraska, Iowa, and South Dakota can take advantage of. So the main question that I want to definitely ask as we're closing up here is how to love our cops. What resources do you offer that law enforcement families in Nebraska, Iowa, or South Dakota might be able to take advantage of?
So right now we don't have anybody as a state liaison in any of those three states. So everything has got to be online that we offer, or in hand, as we say, rather than in person. So we have the number one thing right now is February 18th. We are beginning what we're calling our National Book Club. And what we're asking people to do, it's basically spouses. Grab a spouse or two and get a copy of Chip on My Shoulder, read 2 chapters a week, take those questions that are at the end of each chapter, talk with your officer first at home, and then come and talk with them with a couple of trusted friends. And then every Thursday night, we're gonna have some speakers. So I'll be on there, but I'll also have other experts, probably a therapist or two, and just really kind of bring home even more from the book. And this process, the reason we're doing this is because we can't get together. We can't do our conferences that we normally do. And so we're looking to just talk about some proactive things that you can do in your own homes. Create a community of support. So we're hoping that happens. And then also increasing that communication with your officer at home. And that we're hoping that this will create support for our officers that they may or may not have right now, of just really bringing forth the support, because they really need that right now, especially at home. And so the National Book Club, and go on our website. I think we have it on our website, or our Facebook page, How to Love Our Cops. And we've got a little link. And then we have peer support. So we've trained about 25 officers and spouses that if you need somebody to talk to and you have no access to a therapist, well, we'll find you one. But really, if you just need to talk to somebody who's been there, we've got gals and guys been through a lot of stuff that can talk over the phone. And then we have it, so you can go to our website and press on, if you need somebody to talk to, there's peer support, press on that, and then somebody will get to you. And we also find out if there are therapists who are culturally competent in your area, and we will find that for you.
How can everybody best find you and How to Love Our Cops? Give us that URL and any other contact information again, please.
We have our website is how2loveourcops.org. How2loveourcops.org. We are on Facebook still, at least at this point. There you go. And then as we get the states together, we'll also have Facebook pages for that as well. So it'll be in state and then the national one as well. And then we're also on Instagram. I think we're on Twitter right now. That may be changing. But yeah, we're trying to get our social media, and then once we have the podcast up and running, then we'll have a YouTube channel. So we'll be, COVID has allowed us to really work on some things that we otherwise wouldn't have had time to.
Sure.
And so it's been a good thing. So we're rolling out several different things in the next few months. So we're excited about that.
Yeah. COVID has forced us to embrace technology, whether we have liked it or not. Any last very, very quick questions or parting words before I thank Vicki for being with us today?
Well, Vicki, I just want to thank you. I can't wait to get this information out to our members. Already following you on Facebook, so that's wonderful.
Excellent.
I do know that this is a nonprofit organization, but we as a credit union would like to make some kind of contribution. So for your time today, I know you've donated your time, but we really appreciate it, and it's such a good cause.
I am going to go out on a limb and say that if you go to howtoloveourcops.org, that there is probably a donation button on the website. Am I correct?
Yes, okay. It is. But we also have an address, I think, on there as well, P.O. Box 811, so in Penryn, California. So, yeah. And
so either way.
So if you did want to write a check, it's to How to Love Our Cops. Send it
okay.
So, yeah.
Thank you, Mary. That's very, very kind. And thank you, Vicki, for being with us. So much great insight as usual. And I know the Police Federal Credit Union of Omaha really appreciate you taking an hour with us and giving some excellent insight to the members of Police Federal Credit Union of Omaha and all law enforcement families, frankly, in Nebraska, Iowa, and South Dakota. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. And I want to hear more about the Blue Review.
Yeah, I think I think there's probably a video or two out there. But for the recording, we will wrap this up here. We plan on being back with you next month with another Q&A session with another great expert like Vicki Newman in February, and there will be more information on that. So thank you to everybody that has joined us live, and thank you to everybody that is watching the recording. Take care and stay safe out there.
Yeah.
Thank you for watching the Blue Family News Q&A series, brought to you by Police Federal Credit Union of Omaha. To learn more about our guest expert, Vicki Newman, and her organization, go to howtoloveourcops.org. To learn more about Police Federal Credit Union of Omaha, go to opfcu.net.